There were a lot of factors that made daily living just incredibly difficult.
I feel you, bro. It was a nightmare. Ugh. Hi guys, this is Puffy. So, I recently resigned from my previous job, then I've got so many free time on watching YouTube. One day I was searching on Uncle Roger's review video and guess what? People are also doing review video on Uncle Roger's review video. And then I realized there's a YouTuber called Mrs.Eats who has made one of them and recently uploaded a video called Why You Hate Living in Japan. As a foreigner who is planning to move to Japan sooner or later this year, I'm not sure how I'm gonna react to this video. Will this encourage me, or even worse, if I find moving to Japan is gonna be the biggest mistake I've made in my life after watching this video? Let's watch this together then. Disclaimer. This is my first time filming video in English, and English is not even my first language, so please don't joke about my English, okay? If you're gonna joke about this, I'm gonna do nothing about it. I blame myself. Okay, now let's go.
For some of you, moving to Japan would be a dream come true, right? But
yes.
Interestingly, I know so many people from overseas that moved to Japan and hated it.
Yeah, this happens.
I lived briefly in Japan a while ago.
Have you realized how crazy those foreigners are when they run into Pokemon and Pikachu? I mean, they would love to take pictures with Pokemon. I've never done that. I'm more of a Final Fantasy fan, by the way.
The year I spent in Japan was probably the most unhappy of my life.
So don't be surprised if it happens to you. Almost everyone who moves to Japan will hate Japan or Japanese culture sooner or later. You might think it's impossible, especially Japan has so many cool things like anime, crazy game shows.
The prank show is the least attractive thing from Japan. I mean, if somebody's gonna play this kind of prank on me, I'll be dead. And I'll punch him to death.
And Mr. Eats' favorite electric baths. Yes, in some public baths in Japan, there are baths that send electric currents into the water. But don't worry, it's totally safe because water doesn't conduct electricity at all.
When it comes to bath, please stick to the traditional one. Always stick to the traditional one. It's perfect already.
I've known so many people from overseas who moved to Japan and then hate Japan after, living here for months or sometimes years later. They usually come here because they loved video games, Japanese culture, or they just wanted some good old-fashioned Japanese fucking.
Me, and also me. I must say Mrs.Eats really knows me very well.
But after a while of living here, they become depressed. They hate Japan, and the only thing they want is go back to home.
Is that a dead person?
For God's sake, are you okay? Dad, I hate Japan. I want to go home.
There are many reasons why it happens. Maybe some of you have heard of cultural iceberg.
For some reason, this graph reminds me of when people describing dark web to me. They use the exact same graph. Oh.
If you imagine the culture of one country to be an iceberg floating in the ocean, the part of the iceberg you can see is usually the material aspect of the country's culture. So for Japan, this would be video games, Japanese food, cosplay, statues of Colonel Sanders in samurai
video
armor,
games, especially
obvious
video
Japanese
games.
stuff. But what you don't see is the rest of the iceberg. And this is where the non-material parts of the culture are. This can be things like ideas.
I see hentais on the top of the iceberg. And the erotic gacha, okay. Music good, food okay.
Like ideas on work ethic, views on raising children, how society views discriminated people.
You have to live there long enough to realize, oh, there's actually some dark sides under the iceberg.
So, because most of you who are watching this video might be interested in living in Japan or moving to Japan in the future, so I thought it would be a great idea to ask Mr. Eats to talk about his own experience and how he's been dealing with it.
Mrs. Eats' husband.
Hello everyone, it's Mr. Eats. Now let's say you have this big plan to move to Japan. As you begin to prepare for your move, you start dreaming about all the adventures that you're gonna get into. Your happiness level starts to go higher and higher, and then you finally make that trip across the ocean, you get off the plane, and you're standing smack dab in the middle of Tokyo. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the experience is all so overwhelming. Now every single thing that you're doing feels like a grand adventure and your happiness is just going through the roof. Welcome to the honeymoon phase.
Yes, regardless of the other frustration phases, actually the honeymoon phase comes like the first month staying in Japan. It's like super excited all the time.
The first of 4 phases of culture shock that you're going to experience. Now for most people, this is the most incredible part about moving to a new country. You're going to love the culture, the language, and the people. Seriously, you could get mugged in a back alley and you'll probably come out of it saying, wow, that was the most polite mugging I've ever had.
Even the robbers are so polite. That's a super typical Japanese leigi culture. This, at the beginning, you love it so much and then you might hate it.
Now, the amount of time that you spend here in the honeymoon phase and the next 3 phases varies from person to person. Now, when I moved to Japan, I was placed in this really nice little countryside town where I quickly made friends and became a part of the local community. I fell in love with every aspect of that town and the people around me.
Making friends with local people is so important, even more important than learning the language, from my point of view. And it helps you to fit into the local society very fast. And you won't be that lonely after moving to a new place from the place that you were familiar with.
Heck, I even love my job as an English teacher there.
Oh, so Mr. Eats' first job was English teacher then. Ah, good. For those who are native English speaker or you happen to be a very good English speaker, being a language teacher is always a very good choice for starting your life in Japan.
I found so much joy and happiness there that by the ripe old age of 28, I was considering my retirement there. But all of that came crashing down after I met Mrs. Eats.
What?
No.
Welcome to the living room
Mr.
floor
Eats
where
get
we will be
punished.
spending the rest of our night tonight. Now, what I wanted to say was that meeting Mrs. Eats was the best thing that could have ever happened in my life. But it was all of the other circumstances that followed that led me to a really, really dark place in life. The second phase of culture shock, the frustration phase.
I've spent 3 months living in Japan 5 years ago, and I would like to say that the honeymoon phase disappeared very fast. I sort of confronted the frustration phase in Japan as well, even though it was just for 3 months.
Now, once you hit the peak of happiness during the honeymoon phase, you'll start to get used to the new world around you.
Starting from
and your
50
happiness will
and
actually
hit
begin to
100
decline
and then
pretty
go
quickly.
straight
The
to
things you
zero.
found most exciting have now become very, very normal to you. And the things that you didn't mind too much actually become annoying or
This
even
won't surprise me
frustrating.
at all.
But the frustration phase goes much
Anymore.
deeper than that. This is a point where depression, resentment, and anger really can start to set in.
Well, I guess it is really common for foreigners who start a new life in other countries, not just in Japan. It may happen anywhere if the honeymoon phase has faded.
So as my relationship with Mrs. Eats got deeper and deeper and we got closer and closer, I decided to leave that small town that I love so much to the big city of Osaka.
I think that's a big mistake for Mr. Eats from moving from the countryside to the city, because the countryside in Japan is way more attractive than those big cities in Japan, like Tokyo or Osaka. I guess maybe I'm a city person who grew up and worked in city for so many years now, and I just want to get away with all those city lifestyle and get back to the countryside lifestyle.
There were a lot of factors that made daily living just incredibly difficult. The first was dealing with an actual Japanese-style commute. Now, in my old town, I lived about a 5-minute bike ride away from school, so I never had to get on a train or a bus. But here in Osaka, I had to get on some of the most crowded trains and subways. Not only that, but my school was 2.5 hours away. So I was up at 5:30 to get to school by 8 and...
I feel you, bro. Back when I was studying Japanese in Tokyo, I have to spend like 3 hours to commute from Yokohama to Tokyo every day. It was a nightmare, especially during the rush hour. It was,
It was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare.
And while I did love teaching at the school that I was at in my small town, it really wasn't the case for my school in the bigger city of Osaka. And to add insult to injury, there is a glass ceiling when it comes to your actual salary. You'll quickly find that for most teaching jobs here in Japan, you're going to hit the max of the salary, which is around 20 to 25k annually. And in a lot of cases, this wage will almost never rise.
True. There is a salary ceiling for language teacher in Japan, and that's why some of the foreigners I know have chose to be a language teacher at first and then switch job to a Japanese kaisha or even as a headhunter. Because working as a headhunter, you don't really have to speak fluent Japanese like working in the kaisha. You basically speak English most of the time. By the way, headhunter is also a very good choice for starting your life in Japan, as you can also make money from that and you don't really have to speak Japanese.
Now, you could earn more money if you started teaching at a university or at a wealthy private school. You're going to be doing 2 to 3 times more work for that amount of pay. Now, while you're young and single, 25k isn't actually that bad. But once you start to settle down and you want to have kids, that 25k is not enough at all. And I haven't even mentioned that it's pretty common for Japanese women to quit their jobs after the child is born. So if you are a man and you are only earning 25k from your teaching job, you're gonna have to pick up a lot of part-time jobs in addition to your full-time job just to make ends meet. And trust me, it is insanely common how many of my expat teacher friends have part-time jobs on the side while they're still teaching full-time jobs.
Well, that's
and
painful.
Here's another reason that you're gonna hate living in Japan. The differences in work culture and relationships at the office. Going back to our cultural iceberg, this is the stuff below the water. Things like office politics, relationships with your coworkers, the expectations that they have on you at work, and so many other different factors that are very, very different from what you're used to back home. Japanese societal hierarchy also plays a huge role in the workplace, and it's really important for you to be not only respectful, but be willing to go above and beyond for your superiors at work. And of course, workplace bullying does exist in Japan, so if you ever find yourself being treated unfairly, don't be surprised if you're told to just gaman.
This is actually super common in Hong Kong as well. Or as I imagine, in most of the East Asia countries, it is really common. Yeah, I've suffered from that. I know how it feels.
Loneliness and feeling isolated is another really big thing that you're going to hate in Japan. Now, most people move out of that honeymoon phase way quicker than they can actually establish a good, solid friend group. And I'm not just talking about occasional acquaintances that you see from time to time and you don't mind chatting to every now and then. I'm talking about people that you can really trust. Friends that not only share the same interests and culture as you, but friends who you can really open yourself up to. But even if you are able to establish those kinds of friendships, not a lot of them have plans to live there for as long as you may plan to. So it may be entirely possible that your new best friend was already planning to move to Thailand 6 months after you got here.
Well, I guess it happens to everywhere, not just in Japan. If you decided to move to a new country, I think this kind of situation may happen. I've known some of the expats in Hong Kong, and they probably just gonna stay in Hong Kong for 2 years and then move back to the country they're from.
So as the stress piles up and the loneliness sets in, this is when you really start to hit the lows.
Oh, this is sad.
Shock. And this is a bad place to be in because you just become so bitter and angry and blaming Japan and the country when in many cases the country and the culture of Japan have nothing to do
this is not
with
Japan's
whatever you're
fault.
angry at. But thankfully there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's called the adjustment phase. If you don't give up, you will start to adjust to whatever the situation is that you're in.
So now coming back
Whether
to
that's being more
25.
comfortable on relying on others to help you out, figuring out some solution to something annoying that's happening in your life, or maybe even getting your language skills up to a point where you can comfortably say things that you want to say. You'll eventually start to find some solutions, these little wins to problems in your life that make things a lot easier on yourself. And then eventually you're going to hit the final phase of culture shock, and that is the acceptance phase. You're finally going to be able to stop putting your own expectations onto
So
Japanese
now we're back
society
to 50.
and trying to
So
control
50,
things around
50.
you, and instead learning how to control yourself into better fitting into how Japanese society works.
So many layers.
Of course, there are still
So
going to be
many
things that
layers.
will bother you from time to time, but you're going to be in a much better mental space to deal with those problems. You're going to become more comfortable with your day-to-day life, and it's not going to feel like every day is a struggle.
So, what are some culture shock tips you would give to someone who is planning to move to Japan?
No matter who you are going to go through the phases of culture shock. And when you do eventually go through the frustration phase, always remember that if you can stick through it, you're eventually going to go through the acceptance phase, and then things will become much better after that. Try to learn the language as quickly as you can.
Yes, learning the language as soon as possible is so important. That's why my first thing moving to Japan is to get into a language school and review all the Japanese I have learned so far, and to learn to speak proper Japanese so that I can fit into the community faster.
And because I would say that probably 95-99% of your frustration is going to be because you don't understand and you can't say what you want to say. Try to make friends with the locals.
This also.
When you have friends that are local Japanese people, it's a lot easier to rely on them. And it's nice to know that these people are going to be here for as long as you plan to stay.
Yes, fully agree with this. Don't be shy on making local friends. As a matter of fact, back when I was not able to speak Japanese properly, I still break my comfort zone to make local friends. And actually, most of them are very, very nice. And they taught me so many, like, the Japanese cultural thing that makes me fit into Japanese local community way more faster.
Have a stash of your favorite foods in the closet for emergency situations whenever you're really missing home. There's something magical about it. It just makes you feel so much better, and it just relieves just a ton of stress.
Then in my case, 螺蛳粉.
It's really important to make sure that you're not putting your own expectations on what you believed Japan should have been. Accept the culture for what it is. Accept the people for who they are. And I think you'll be in a much better position that when you come out of the frustration phase, you didn't convince yourself that Japan is a bad country and Japanese people are all bad people.
Moving to a completely new country with a different culture from your own country is just already overwhelming, right? If you have something that makes you really feel happy, for example, if you love drawing, bring your favorite drawing kits to Japan, and then whenever you feel frustration or when you feel lonely, you start doing whatever you really enjoy doing it. If you are not happy, make yourself happy first. Then you can challenge.
Me
so you can
playing video
recharge
games.
And then try again.
So we talked a lot about the ups and downs of living in Japan, and everybody is going to go through them. But I'm pretty sure I can say that there's one absolutely positive thing that you're gonna find when you're living in Japan, and that is a Japanese convenience store.
Yes,
Agree.
we have just so many
双手赞
amazing
成
things about them that I talked about in this video. So make sure you watch it and I'll see you in that video. Thanks for watching. Okini.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Eats. ありがとうございます. After watching Mr. and Mrs. Eats video, I've gotta say, it is really helpful for me to re-evaluate my whole decision of moving to Japan. As a matter of fact, when I told my friends and family that I am moving to Japan forever, they actually questioned about my decision, and they thought it was just me playing childish, but deep inside I know I was not. I made the decision based on my previous experience living in Japan, and even though it was just for 3 months. And based on Mr. and Mrs. Eats' summary on foreigner moving to Japan thing, I actually foresee so many phases that I am gonna get into, especially the frustration part. I have dealt with so many frustrating moments back when I was first moving to Hong Kong, and I survived. And all those dark sides that we say, well, we cannot see above the iceberg. Is it correct? Actually, all those dark sides that Mr. Eats mentioned, it is really common in Hong Kong as well. So overall, I'm still confident of moving to Japan. And Mr. and Mrs. Eats did not ruin my fantasy of moving to Japan. So thank you again, Mr. and Mrs. Eats. Your video is the second comforting thing besides convenience store. Sorry, convenience store is still number one. The number one comforting thing in Japan. And thank you guys for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!